Good morning, everyone. Brian here with BMK Magic Explorations. This morning we have a little bit of an early video on the Neopagan Wheel of the Year Festival, Holiday, and Sabbat, Litha, also known as Midsummer or the Summer Solstice. That actually comes up tomorrow, the 20th, but again, because my schedule has been having me see some early morning obligations and all, including tomorrow morning where I just would not have time. Well, though I would prefer to do this on the early morning of Litha itself, a day in advance will just have to do. So consider this just a bit early. Anyway, Litha, which looks, where it's spelled Litha, like it would be Litha, which that depending on your locality and particular language, where you're from, what language you speak, Litha might not actually be entirely incorrect. But Litha, where it's pronounced more like you have two E's in there, as opposed to the I, is generally considered the most accurate and common pronunciation. Well, if not most common, just the most correct. But again, like I said, depending on locality and language, Litha wouldn't necessarily be wrong either. Anyway, like a lot of the, as I've mentioned before, the Wheel of the Year, which is definitely common to, say, Wicca and Druidry or Neo-Druidry, Celtic Neopaganism and such, may not be entirely universal among absolutely all of the religions and other faiths that we would find throughout Neopaganism, but it is pretty common, including Midsummer or the Summer Solstice, Litha. Most, if they don't celebrate or have it directly, usually have something that's equivalent or similar enough. After all, with Neopaganism, we are talking about faiths which, for the most part, are at least partially based around one of the major themes being the yearly seasonal cycle. So yes, you could find some variation or something equivalent in most. Okay, a little bit of history on it. Well, before I get too much into that, I could say, we could find it celebrated, it's certainly on the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. Druidry also has it, or Neo-Druidry, and by extension, in a way, Celtic Neopaganism, which really, if you look at it, the Celts were mostly just the Druids were mostly the Celtic priestly class of sorts, Paleo-Pagan speaking. So there is a lot of crossover between those two, though there is a little bit of distinction, when you're talking about Druidry or Neo-Druidry as opposed to Celtic Neopaganism. Anyway, it's known by the name Alban Hefin, or Hefin. I forget exactly the pronunciation. I did look it up, so forgive me if I'm kind of slaughtering it. But Alban Hefin, or Hefin, is Hefin is kind of more commonly, it's the way somebody North American English speaker like myself might find themselves pronouncing it. That's the equivalent there. As far as I could tell, it's not directly found in, say, heathenry such as Norse Neopaganism or Nordic or Germanic Neopaganism directly. They're a lot more about, forgive me if I'm, again, slaughtering this pronunciation, something really pronounced blot, but Bloat, I forget exactly how you pronounce it. They're more about, celebrating those some, and don't really have as much of a set yearly cycle, and it kind of varies from individual to individual and system to system some. And, well, beyond that, some say if they were attending, say, a public celebration and all, they may well find themselves celebrating Litha or otherwise midsummer, summer solstice. It wouldn't be that uncommon. It's kind of up to the individual and the tradition they're following, or if they're more eclectic. So it does have a lot of crossover in a way, though not always so direct. As for a little bit of the history, we know it goes back at least to ancient Rome, where they would usually be celebrating it in celebration partly of the goddess Fors Fortuna. They would go, sometimes they would go and visit her temple. I think I read sometimes rowing over in boats or something like that, and they would light bonfires, come back, and they or stay there, leave offerings, and then they may or may not come back, and do feasting and a whole lot of other types of celebrations. So we know it goes back at least that far. And then as we get more towards the Dark and Middle Ages, I guess you could say, it was pretty common also. They would light bonfires and wake fires in celebration. And also children, like young boys, they would also play games, and they would take, the kids would take or collect what they called brands, which I didn't get a chance to look up exactly what the term is referring to. But it seems like they would form them into wheels, which they would roll as kind of a symbolic way in their play of imitating the progression of the sun through the sky. Litha is technically another, how you'd say, solar or sun holiday or Sabbath festival, which most of them are in the middle of the year. And basically, it's kind of the opposite of Yule or Yuletide in December, which is basically the shortest day of the year, where you get kind of the shortest day with the less sunlight and all. Well, this is the longest day of the year, where you would get the most sunlight, and depending on your region, could be pretty hot. And the sun would be up in the sky, reaching its highest point for much longer in the year. So, also, both Neo and even the it is believed Paleo Druids and Celts over in Europe would commonly observe it around Stonehenge and other types of monuments, and things like that. In fact, in Stonehenge, it hits, it aligns perfectly there, so it makes sense. I forget, I think one's in Washington State, and I forget where the other one is, but we do have some Stonehenges here in North America, in the U.S. I've never visited them, but I'd imagine these types of celebrations also take place there, too. And, of course, back then and even now, there would also be a lot of dancing and singing. There'd be maypole feasting, maypole dancing, feasting, whole lot. Also, flowers would be collected, and still are, to create wreaths and garlands, not to mention sunrise watching, which are all things you could still do, whether if you are celebrating as part of a group in a larger celebration, or just your own a solitary practitioner's observance and celebration. Sure, things like that, creating floral wreaths and garlands, sunrise watching, dancing, singing. Not sure if it'd be so easy to get a maypole up for maypole dancing, feasting, wake fires, bonfires, playing games, and not sure if you could collect brands to roll a wheel around like that. All those things are things you could really do for your own celebration. Again, whether as a larger group celebration or as a solitary practitioner. Now, some deities who have been commonly over time associated with this particular Sabbath are all pretty well sun-related or light-related. From the Egyptians, what we kind of call, I think they call it Kemetism today. we have the sun god Ra. From the Greeks, we would have Apollo, the Greek god of light, and the sun. And Norse, which, yeah, here's kind of your connection with Germanic neopaganism, heathenry, and Norse neopaganism. We have the Norse gods Baldur, and also the goddesses Brigid and Freya. And that's just a small sampling. Over in much more recent and, contemporary systems, created, again, Wicca revived, but is kind of more recreated here in the modern day. You have a lot of times the Oak King and the Holly King, which somewhere in there the Green Man kind of plays in. And kind of the significance for Wiccans, at least in main traditions, it comes in that what's kind of being symbolically observed here is that the Oak King and the Holly King generally, it kind of is a symbolic representation of the battle between them, which at this point the Holly King wins. And, well, the Oak King is said to rule from Yule to Litha, so this is a time where his rule is out for the rest of the cycle. And the Holly King would rule from Litha back to Yule, in a cycle that would repeat each year. That's basically where the significance comes in there, so. It's one that I guess you could say, like I said, is fairly widely celebrated, maybe not strictly observed by all. Me, one of my ways of doing it, again, is making these videos currently. I guess it might be a good time to bring up that I may not always do, as I mentioned before, I may do some different variations on the Wheel of the Year or other celebrations which are equivalent or the version from another faith of it, since I am more of a general magic, supernatural magic practitioner and student. But there may also be some years where I really don't put in a cycle like this in my videos, or where it's more sparse and I don't do them all, so kind of will depend on my circumstances, my time, and, well, also too, if I went over them all, every year it might get a little, I wouldn't say quite boring, but a bit repetitive in terms of, some of the information would just be going over the same thing again, or I'd have to skip out like I do some here, some information, and save some for another year, so really I'd have to have quite a pad here with a whole lot of information to cover in full detail. Ooh, that'd be like I might as well be presenting a full video essay, which I'm not trying to do. So anyway, that's mostly what there is to it with Litha. It's the summer solstice, the midsummer celebration, and what we're celebrating is basically this time of the year in the seasonal cycle, and it is a great time, though I admit, especially here, if you're like me from East Texas, a pretty hot time, but that could be worse. And so, gosh, I'm gonna knock this video out pretty quick, I guess. I do have a couple of recommendations and links here. My preferred YouTubers, Magical Crafting and Hearthwitch, both have videos where they go over some simple rituals and all that can be done for Litha or midsummer, summer solstice, which is kind of a terminology they use a bit more, though. As I saw, at least with Hearthwitch's video, she does refer to it as Litha quite a bit. In fact, that's one way that I got reminded of the correct technical pronunciation. Though, like I said, there are some variations on it, depending on where you're from and what language you speak, and none of them are technically incorrect. And so, since I give some more good information there, I will go ahead and leave some recommendations and links to those videos for you to check out if you would like. And also, it's not maybe as in-depth as it could be, but there's a nice Wikipedia article going over it under the, I forget if it puts under summer solstice or under midsummer, but a nice little Wikipedia article, which is a good starter point for learning more. So I will leave a link to that too. And in the meantime, if you enjoy this channel's content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And please don't hesitate to leave any questions, comments, or suggestions down in the comments section below. I again hope I and this channel have helped to bring a bit more magic into your lives. And though it's a morning early, a blessed Litha 2024 to everyone. And hopefully I will see everyone back here again in the next video.